Okay, so let's get started soldering an LED strip. So before we begin, we should make sure we notate the arrow direction. And we're going to be soldering in the towards where the arrows are pointing. So the 5-volt data in and ground line, that all that text should be upside down to where you're soldering. First things first, we got to cut off the excess plastic carefully, just trying not to cut through the strip. So I'm gonna fast forward just a bit here because it was kind of a pain to get it off, but I finally did. Cool. So now we have to get our LED strip set up in a set of clamps or helping hands, and this is kind of like the trickiest part, making sure things are lined up and secure so that what we're soldering together doesn't move around and wiggle and kind of fall apart on us. So I have my strip set up in my helping hands, and I'm just going to go in with my solder. It's already heated up at 630, I believe. Put a little solder on the tip of my iron, and I just dabbed a little bit of that onto those copper connection points. Now I'm gonna tin. I think I've already stripped my wire, or stripping my wires now, but I'm gonna tin the tip of my wires so that both the LED and the wires I'm soldering on have a little bit of that solder to help the adhesion when I start heating it up. So just going in with a little dab of solder on my iron and kind of like painting it on almost. Just a little bit so that you can see the silver, not completely covering that copper, but just enough to have a little sort of glue on that. So, like I said earlier, this is sort of like the hardest part of soldering for me. Just getting everything lined up and not moving around on you. So make sure you can, if you have helping hands, make sure you can like tighten them. And my best advice for doing this is actually like having them like almost kind of like pushing up against each other so that there is like this tension between the wire and then whatever you're soldering onto. So taking that tip of my iron, heating up on the wire, which already has that solder on it, and going in and dabbing. And I did have a little trouble keeping focus here with my camera because I was so close, but I'm just gonna zoom through the next section. All I'm kind of doing is just like aligning my wires with those points, heating them up, and then putting a little dab of solder on there to secure it. So I finished soldering, and it's not the prettiest, but it's secure. The wires aren't falling off, and I can give them kind of like a little bit of a tug and wave the LED strip without anything falling off. So I'm happy, and I know it's on there and it's good enough for me. So flipping the video over so you guys can see what I'm about to do here, I'm pulling out my multimeter, and this is a tool for testing electronics, electricity, resistance, all sorts of stuff. So plugging this in with my black in the COM and my red in the little connector that has like the ohm resistance icon on there. I'm plugging red into my hot line and black into my ground line, and then leaving the data pin or the data in. We don't need to connect to it. So testing my continuity, I'm seeing that there's activity going on, and then I'm going to move this over to the resistance and test for the resistance. And essentially what I'm checking for is that there is electricity flowing, and there was. So now that that all looks good to me, I'm going to taper up, insulate the raw wires. Not that anything is touching, but just in case, the LED strip does get squeezed or moved around, I'll just take electrical tape and cover all the raw or exposed copper and solder. And ideally I would use heat shrink tubing and just like take my solder and like secure that in place, but this is kind of what I had to work with here. And now plugging my lines in, my ground, my hot, and my data line, and we're gonna get to testing. And what's really nice about this doorbell wire I'm using, I think I just got it at Home Depot, you can just plug these into the breadboard. I believe it is 16 gauge wire, and it fits really snugly into those the holes on the breadboard. So getting into the Arduino IDE, I've already included the fast LED library, made sure that I'm numbering how many LED pixels there are, what data pin connection it is, and then setting like predetermined brightness. I'm going to go in and just do a little bit of editing here, and this way I can know that everything's working. Like I did check it with my multimeter, so I know theoretically it's going to be able to work. But once you send the code over, that's how you know it's really working. So I'm going to do just a little bit of editing on this code, making sure all my semicolons are there and that everything looks good. So let me fast forward just a hair. So I've got the code in an okay spot. No error messages popping up. I am still missing a couple fast LED dot shows, but I'm gonna get in and fix that in a second. So here I am, doing that final testing, making sure that my LED is receiving the data that I'm sending to it. And I'm using the fill solid command from the fast LED library, addressing the LEDs they number from 0 and onward, 0 being the first LED. And I'm just telling it, hey, LED from 0 to 3, become red. And then I'm gonna go in and add a LEDs plus and then a number in order to kind of like skip the first X amount of LEDs so I can individually address each one. And lastly, I'm just going to add in in my setup, I'm going to set up the LEDs so they do not turn on, or they're being told to be black, which would be considered off, at the start of my routine. That way I know every time I send over a new code that we don't have the data from the old code showing up, and we're not seeing those old colors. So sending that over, I'm seeing that yes, this is successful, but I'm still only getting the blue. Adding the fast LED.show after every fill solid, and then just editing a short delay between each one. So I finally got the code where I wanted it, and functional too. Have a delay between my three colors. Let's actually remove that black and change it to yellow, so we have like a tri flashing color situation. But yeah, it looks like it's doing exactly what I wanted to, so awesome.